are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again, and man, we have an amazing guest today. We have Chris Dubois. He is a dynamic leadership coach. He is the CEO of Lean Labs. He is also an Army veteran. Wanted to say thank you for what you have done for your country, sir. And we're going to learn a little bit about Chris today, and just not just about his business, but his purpose, his leadership journey, and also his journey in military and as a veteran. So first and foremost, Chris, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Hey, I am great. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. So, man, let's start out first a little bit about your background. Like I mentioned in the intro, you serve in the Army. Tell us a little bit about what inspires you to start that journey and a little bit about, what you learned along the way.
Yeah, so this is the fun part. I went to my freshman year of college, was working 5 jobs to try paying for everything out of pocket. And I went to my parents' house, start cleaning out my bedroom for stuff after that freshman year. And I found a note that I'd written to myself when I was in 6th grade or something that said, hey, you're going to join the Army. You're going to be an infantry officer, go do all these cool things. And I kind of realized nothing was stopping me from actually doing that. And so that same week I enlisted, and I went into the Army Reserve and transferred to the University of Maine and did ROTC there. And so I kind of set myself up on the path to, while serving, in the Army Reserve, to become an officer. While I was in that process, I was in a pretty bad hiking accident where I was doing a winter ascent of a mountain. Blizzard swept in, and just to kind of abbreviate that story, I ended up falling off a cliff, fracturing both my ankles, and having to stick it out on the mountain for the night in -70 temperatures. So that was a pretty rough night, as one might imagine. And search and rescue found me the next day, with a body bag, and they were on a recovery mission. So I felt like I had a second chance at some stuff from there, and the healing process, though, was long. I had some pretty severe frostbite that I got from that. Although first doctor wanted to amputate my feet, and I asked for a second opinion, as one does when you're told you're going to lose a body part. And so I got second opinion, said, hey, let's see what happens. I'm only missing part of it, though. So that was a win. But it took about 4 months for myself to be able to walk again. And it was a long journey, with just like being on pain meds, things like that. And so I kind of had to, from there, relearn everything I thought I knew, even about myself, because my character had started to change while I was on medication and everything. But so I did a lot of self-reflection during that time, and was able to get my health back, get my ability to move again, to walk. And I was finally able to convince the Army that I could commission and become an officer. And so became an infantry officer. I got amazing experiences in the Army. I spent 7 years on active duty. Got to work with some of the smartest, just hardest, soldiers and just people that I will ever meet. And so I learned a lot. And during that time, I got to work with a lot of great leaders and a lot of not so great leaders. And I started finding some common threads with the ones that were just extremely successful. And so I started to kind of take note, write these down, pay attention to them, and started to adopt their practices into my own, leadership. And that's where dynamic leadership started to become a thing, with the idea that, you're never going to have the same team, same situation or anything. So why don't you look at how can we approach this problem rather than stepping in saying, hey, this is how I lead, everyone else change to me. How can you step in as a leader and say, this is how I'm going to change for the situation? And so after that 7 years, when I finally decided to get out, my wife and I had 2 kids. And so we just really want to settle down. And so we moved back to Maine, and I started working for a marketing company. And while working at this marketing company, I was learning how to market. I didn't really have any experience there. And it became pretty apparent quick that I did have a lot of leadership skills that could be useful there. So after 9 months, I became the head of operations. And then after about 3 years, I became the CEO. And during that time, last year, actually, I had a medical issue where out of the blue, one of my legs just swelled up really bad. And so I went to the emergency room. And it turns out that I had a massive blood clot that was taking up, basically the entire thigh, femoral and popliteal veins. And because it was so large, it was a very kind of harrowing event that caused me to need to slow down a lot. I was working long hours. I was doing a lot of like strenuous physical activity, and it really caused me to kind of sit back and just, reevaluate where I was and what I was doing with my life. And I kind of realized through that we don't necessarily know when the end's going to come. And so I wanted to start working towards a passion of mine. And even there, it's really hard to find a passion. But if you can find those like common threads in your life, things that just keep popping up that excite you, I started looking for that, and I realized leadership is that for me. And so I started coaching and do leadership coaching for startup founders to help them out so they can have efficient, effective teams, and they can have some of the skills that they didn't necessarily need to have the experience to get, so that they could kind of cut that learning time down and get better results much faster. And so I started doing that, and here I am now talking to you on your show.
Man, that's an awesome story, man. And I know we're getting bits and pieces of the story, but I think what's awesome is what you learn in the Army is what I'm getting from that story. Mm-hmm. That part of the story is that leadership value. And touch on that a little bit, because people on the outside have their thoughts about what they think is involved with the military, but you being in the military, how does leadership in that space enable you to really tap into your full potential?
Yeah, so there's a lot of great opportunities that the military gives. So like when I got my first platoon, as a 22-year-old second lieutenant, I moved to Fort Wainwright, Alaska in the winter. I would not recommend that part to anyone. But I got there and was immediately put in charge of 36 men and $13.8 million worth of equipment. And so like any U.S. taxpayer is like, their hands started shaking when they heard that, because of the amount of responsibility that goes to a 22-year-old. But that kind of forces you to get in it right away. Like there are huge stakes, right? It's not just that I'm responsible for 36 men. I'm responsible for the lives of 36 men and their families. And so you're put in this situation where you have to step up, and like there is no alternative. There's no like quitting. This is what you have to do right now. And so you're really forced into these situations that are going to strengthen you. And the great thing about like being an officer is that you're always partnered up with an enlisted, sergeant who has a lot more time and experience, and who can they coach you through the process. So you always have this, this buddy who you can go back to. You can go to your office, shut the door and be like, hey, this is what I want to do. What do you think? And through their experience, they're able to help guide you so that you are the one who has to make the decision, but you have their guidance to kind of make sure you're on the right track. And so through that, you're able to kind of lower the risk on a lot of things and get better results. But you get to try so many more things, right? Especially I developed the habit of bringing in all of my sergeants and say, hey, this is what I want to do. What do you guys think? And now I'm getting all these different perspectives from everybody. I'm still the guy who has to make that decision, right? But I get to actually learn, okay, he said this was a great idea. He said this was a great idea. Those are not going to work together. So like, which one do I want to go with? But the next mission, I'm going to remember, hey, this guy said this. That might actually work for this one. And so I'm learning much faster because I'm getting all these different opinions. And so all of that's great. One of the challenges with being in the military is that they have what's called the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And it's a giant book full of all of the laws and regulations that you have to follow. And one of them is, hey, if I say something and I'm the leader, you have to follow. That doesn't translate to the business world. And so I do think a lot of military leaders will kind of lean on that when they're, in a command position of some sort. And then when you go into the business world, it's like, okay, now I actually have to work more on motivating people. How do I get them to want to do this? Because they actually want to. They're motivated, not because they have to. But if you can do that while in the military, you're golden.
Once again, listen to R&B Focused Radio, talking to our guest today, Chris Dubois. And when you made that transition from the military to working that marketing job, which you was like light years ahead, because only took you 3 years had to get a big promotion. What were some of the best practices that you use in the military that you continue to use afterwards?
Yeah, I think the one that I stick to the most is like giving everyone the ability to take a disciplined initiative. And so the Army's leadership philosophy is called mission command. There's a bunch of different principles in there. But really it comes down to, like, you as a leader don't always get to see the full picture, but there's someone who's down on the front lines, right? The person who's always doing the work. They're right there where that information is coming in. They get to see everything right as it's happening. Now you can tell that person, hey, take this information and send it all the way back up this chain. Send it to your supervisor, who sends it to theirs, who sends it to me. I'll make a decision and send it all the way back down this chain and give it back to you. That's a method, and it works if you have a super, super junior team, like people who you can't really trust to make decisions because they just don't necessarily know what's happening. But for the most part, that's never going to be the case. And so you want to enable the people who are on that front line to be able to make those decisions in the heat of the moment because they have the information readily available. And so I took that, brought it to our marketing company, and it works. The person who's meeting with the client, who's actually, creating that landing page or those blog posts, they should be the one who's able to make that decision. They don't need to come all the way back and go talk to someone, in operations or the CEO to say, hey, what do you think about this? And sometimes that's okay. If they really don't know what action to take, do it. We want to make sure we're doing the best thing for clients. If you can reduce risk, do it. Not every decision has to be hasty. You can be very deliberate in some. But like people will surprise you with what they're able to come up with for ideas. And so if you give them the ability to take initiative and run with it, they are generally going to have a better idea that is more quickly actioned than if they had sent it all the way back to you to make a decision. So I would say that's probably the biggest thing that I've taken from the military that I've been able to apply in the business world.
It sounds like what I'm getting from this too is being self-reliant and having discipline. Some kind of like, okay, this is what I am assigned to do. This is how I should do it if I want to have this X type results. And to have good results, you got to have not just a plan, but you have to have the willpower to do whatever it takes to make that plan succeed to your best ability. And when you use some of those values that you learn in the military and you teach people in the civilian world, I know you talk with business leaders and help them to lead. What are some of the common threads, you will, that you share as you are teaching those underneath you and also business leaders out there?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing for a leader is to build awareness. It's one of the biggest issues that I see. And it's one of those, it really comes down to being of value. But there are 4 types of awareness. Right? You get self-awareness, interpersonal, team awareness, and then situational awareness. And if a leader can actually pay attention to all of those things and have it, top of mind, so they're constantly just thinking of like making sure they have all of the details, it's like a majority of your problems just go away because you're starting to notice those things that, all of these issues before they become a bigger problem. You can see them and you can get ahead of them. And so I do a lot of different exercises, like we have worksheets, things like that, with my clients, so that we can really develop the habit of becoming more aware. Which sounds very, very meta, to be aware of being aware. But we, through that, just through building awareness, they're able to get substantially better results without actually having to change anything about themselves. It's literally just that they're paying closer attention to details.
Yeah, that was key right there. Details, like they will say, is on the details. And speaking of that, you have a website that people can go visit. It's leadingforeffect.com, where you have right there on the homepage, dynamic leadership training for business professionals. So people who are business professionals, or just someone who is maybe aspiring to be a business professional, can they go to this website and check out your workshops and coaching to see if they're a good fit for you? And if so, what's the day zero look like for them when they get started?
Yes, definitely. Traditionally, the people I'm coaching, you've got a team of like 5 to 10 people at this point, so the stuff that I'm going to teach you and we're going to work through, you can immediately put into play. If you don't have that level, we can talk about doing some of our group sessions. Like you said, on the website, leadingforeffect.com is a contact form. You can jump in there. With any of these group sessions, we're going to start just breaking down some of these different like things you should be aware of. I have an entire exercise called the Leaders Marks, where we rate how you're performing in different areas. And none of these areas are either right or wrong. It's all on a spectrum. And so if I go into a conversation with you because I need to pass on information so that you can go execute part of our plan, I might need to transmit more than receive, right? But some leaders might actually be sitting back and hoping that someone's going to talk back to them. Maybe they have a confidence issue, and so they'll be receiving more than transmitting. When if you're trying to push out a plan, that's probably not the best case. And there's a bunch of different, what level of risk assumption can we have? Do we have to be cautious, aggressive? When it comes to discipline, should we be strict or lenient in this? And we go through, there's 10 of them, and we go through all of these. And as we're going through them, we'll mark down where we think we are for a given situation. We'll do a little after action review, talk through, okay, is this how we actually want to be? Do we think this is what we need? And then we'll mark where we actually want to perform, right? So maybe like I'll take a different color marker. I'll put an X somewhere on the spectrum that says what the ideal is for a given situation. And then every time that situation pops up, we're aiming for the ideal, and we're doing reps, right, of trying to get this. And just through that action, even if you don't own a company, or you're maybe a mid-level manager, you're just a supervisor, you got a small team, just by doing some of these things, you're going to become way more aware than a lot of your peers, and it's going to start showing up in your work. And that's what's going to set you up to get these promotions and the raises along with it, and put you in positions of greater responsibility, so that you can start leading more people and start having a greater influence and a greater impact.
And when you offer coaching with your services, they are tailor-made for the client. Yep. And how is it so important for when they go back to their team that they check back with you, for maybe a progress report or feedback, versus they just do it and they feel like one time that's all they need to do to remember all the stuff they were taught?
Yeah. So my whole philosophy on leadership with a dynamic leadership model is that there is no one perfect way to do everything. Like you'll get a lot of leadership coaches who say like, oh, just do this, you're going to be fine. But it doesn't take into account all of the variables. And so I try teaching how to approach a problem and give you some of the rules and some of the guiding principles so that you can show up and decide for yourself, what is the best way for me to handle this? Because you are an aware leader, you're pulling in all these other details. Now, a lot of times, if you did a one-off coaching session, it could be great for just learning some things and maybe getting an edge, to be able to show up and help your team. But when you get that result, or even if you don't get that result, being able to come back and say, hey, this is what worked. What can I do? Or how else could I approach this? What was wrong with the way I approached this? We talk through that. It gives you someone with outside influence. I am a strong believer that everyone needs a coach. I have multiple coaches from multiple areas of my life because it gives you this other set of eyes that looks in, and they're not seeing this problem from my perspective. They're seeing it from someone outside who has general knowledge over what's going on, and they can start asking the right questions to help drive me in the right direction. And so one-off coaching can be super valuable. If you just need to get through a single problem, like, yeah, let's give you the skills. Let's do what we need to get you there. Really finding someone you can trust who can ask you those hard questions to actually make you better and help you start showing up, towards reaching your potential, I think is critical.
In addition to what you're saying, I will say too, having those people in your life, they're not biased, because we ourselves can be biased. Oh man, I got it together. I'm doing it. And yeah, if you were the outside person looking in, you probably cringe a little bit because you're probably not as big and as sharp and as clear as you think you are. So I think that is very true, that having other people who are qualified, right, to give us feedback, not necessarily our friends, because, friends might be too nice. They may not give you the real perspective because they don't want to hurt your feelings. But someone else can give you what you really need to hear so you can tackle the weak spots that you have.
Right. There's a psychological, I don't know what you call it, like thing that people do, where if I'm debating over two options, I will often go ask advice from the person who's going to give me the advice I really want. Right. So if I want to go as a kid, I want to go skateboarding, and I know my mom thinks it's super dangerous, and I'm really on the fence though. Like, I don't know, should I go skateboarding? Should I not? I'm going to go ask my dad. And then that kind of gives me the idea that, oh, this was a decision I wanted to make. And that's a super simplified version.
Right.
But if you're debating over these big problems in your life, like, is it right for me to punish this employee, or should I, find a way to train them and give them hope for something else? The person that I go ask for advice from is just, as soon as that person pops in my head, it's like, I almost know what decision I want to make from there. And so now I'm not actually debating. I'm looking for like a confirmation bias from whoever is going to give me, that advice back. And so it's better to have a coach who is separate from everything, who's not biased, who can just ask the questions to help me get to the right answer.
Yeah. I can only imagine that was the similar process with you in the military. You had, your superiors who were totally unbiased. Their job was to help you to get to your fullest potential. And with that said, you made a great transition from military to civilian world. And for those who are listening, we're in San Antonio, Texas. So as they say, military city, USA here in San Antonio. For those who are currently in the military, but they have that day on the horizon where they're going to transition to, have another job in the future, what basic general advice would you give to those guys out there and women who are preparing to make that transition?
Yeah, start planning now. I've wanted to be a leadership coach forever. And since I started in the military and I started getting great results, I had the fortune or misfortune, I'm not sure yet, because I was an officer. You don't just finish your contract and get out. You have to apply to get out. It's called an unqualified resignation. And the Army has the ability to say, no, you're not getting out yet. And so they told me, no, you're not getting out twice. So for 2 years, you can only apply once a year. So I had to wait another 2 years. And it was only on my third attempt I was able to actually get out. And so in that time, I was researching. I was like, okay, what do I want to do when I get out? How can I show up so that I'm actually able to perform in the business world, not just because I was a leader, like, believe it or not, being an infantry officer, running around, shooting things, blowing stuff up, jumping out of airplanes. Not a lot of that translates to the business world. And so you have to find those skills that you can leverage. But organizations work completely different, right? There is no just perfect hierarchy in the business world that syncs up with how the Army is run. And so, while it can be close, it's really good to get your hands on something in the business world. Take some classes on business. The Army has some great programs to be able to get tuition assistance, things like that. Take some business classes. Just learn more about the environment you're about to go in, the same way you would learn more about a battlefield before you enter, right? It's just another area of operations that you're moving into. Collect the information that you can, and then you're going to show up and you're going to be ready to win the battle.
And going back to your website, leadingforeffect.com, where people can learn about your coaching, speaking, and workshops, is your workshops okay for those who may not be the actual, business leader with teams, but maybe just an individual who wants to explore a bit? Would that be a good fit?
It could be. So the workshops are normally hosted by an organization. And so it could be, a company says, hey, I want to train up all of my mid-level managers on this topic. And I'll show up and I'll facilitate that workshop to be able to ensure everybody's getting trained up. But I've also worked with some local groups. Usually, churches are a great way. There can also, in talks with some other just local community organizations who just want to put on some type of event. Maybe it's for kids or something else, but there are definite ways you can get into some of these workshops. So if you see one or I'll start posting event updates. Then, if you can get in, I think it's a great way to just start learning more about how you can show up better as a leader.
That's perfect. So basically, if someone, maybe they're not managing teams, but they are involved in their community and church, they can help organize an event through your website and maybe have a workshop at the church or, some kind of center somewhere. So that's awesome. One thing I'll ask too, as we wind this down, for those who have more questions and they want to go to your website, leadingforeffect.com, and they contact you, what was something that they can expect as far as that process?
Yeah, so I'm going to ask a lot of questions back at you to try getting enough context so that I can give you a great idea on what the next step should be. Not everyone who reaches out to me is a great fit for what I actually offer, but I do want to make sure you're getting some help. I have a pretty extensive network. And so I might actually know someone who would be a better fit for you, as a coach, as for facilitating a workshop for you. And so I'm going to ask a lot of questions, and we're going to make sure that, if we are going to work together, it's going to be a great fit so that I can make sure I will get you results, as close as you can guarantee results in the leadership space. Otherwise, we're just going to make sure you still get what you need to keep progressing, in your career and your path as a leader.
Once again, talking to our guest today, Chris Dubois. You can go to his website, leadingforeffect.com. And man, just check out all the great work he's doing. Want to say thanks for you, not just taking time talking to us, but sharing us your experience with the military and the transitioning from the military to working in marketing and getting big promotion and being your own boss. Thank you for your time, Chris.
Thank you. I appreciate it.